Move aside, girl, you're blocking the passage. Do you not understand plain English? Get out of the way now! I'll give you 2 coins for the sack, no more.
5 is the price, friend. Take it or leave it.
Fresh mutton, finest cuts right here.
Hey guys, tonight we step directly into the heart of medieval Europe, a place where you quickly learn that the biggest danger to your health is not the plague cart rolling past you or the armed guards at the gate, but the thick living cloud of human filth settling over everything, including you. You find yourself in Paris in the year 1327, the bells of Notre Dame vibrating the morning air while a sour fog of smoke, sewage, rotting hay, wet wool and unwashed bodies wraps around you like a damp blanket. You're pressed between a baker shouting at a line of impatient customers and a cart piled so high with manure it leaks down the wheels. Someone bumps you, mutters an apology, and the movement releases a puff of lice from their collar that drifts like dandelion fluff. You try not to breathe in, but it's too late. The smells are everywhere, clinging to your tongue, slipping into your lungs, settling into your brain. A woman pours a bucket of something dark and sludgy out a window without warning, and it splashes across the street beside you, steaming in the cold air. She glances down only long enough to see if it hit anyone important. Somewhere behind you, a man hawks into the gutter. Children chase a stray dog with matted fur and visible ribs, and as you stand there trying to orient yourself, the reality smacks you harder than the stench ever could. You probably won't survive this, at least not with a modern immune system. Tonight's journey dives into the shocking and weird things that were totally normal for medieval Europe. And yes, you're going to wish you could wash your hands before we even start, but trust me, that's the last thing medieval people would want you to do. They thought washing was dangerous, suspicious, even sinful. You're about to see why. Before we go deeper, hit that like button, subscribe for more wild slices of history, and comment below with your location and your current local time so I know where in the world you're listening from. Hopefully somewhere with running water. Alright, deep breath. Or don't. Let's go. You begin walking through the narrow street, boots squelching in mud that definitely has more than just water in it, and you start to realise something. Everyone around you looks dusty, sweaty, layered in grime, or all 3 combined. Hair is greasy enough to repel water if it ever encountered any. Faces are streaked with soot from constant fire use. Hands look permanently stained. Clothing? Let's just say it's holding on to its original colour for dear life. The medieval mindset around bathing wasn't simply, we don't do that much. It was, we actively avoid it. Many people believed that warm water opened the pores, and that open pores were gateways for sickness, demons, and the vaporous miasma thought to cause disease. So, while you might be itching to find a bathhouse and scrub yourself raw, the locals would look at you with real concern. To them, willingly exposing your skin to warm water meant you were inviting death. Some doctors specifically recommended that you bathe no more than once a year, preferably in May, the clean month. You approach a well in the centre of the district and watch a few girls haul up buckets of water so cloudy it looks like chicken broth. That will be used for drinking, cooking, and sometimes, if someone is feeling fancy, rinsing their face. But rarely will anyone submerge themselves. Even nobles who had private tubs bathed far less than legend suggests. Hot water, soft skin, relaxed pores. That just sounds like a recipe for the Grim Reaper. And yet medieval Europe wasn't uniformly anti-bath. In fact, in earlier centuries, public bathhouses were everywhere. Chaotic, steamy, loud, social spaces where people ate, drank, played games, held meetings and lounged for hours. Some had multiple rooms, scented oils and heated floors, but by the high and late Middle Ages most bathhouses had gained a reputation for, let's call it, extracurricular activities. Clergy denounced them as dens of sin. Cities taxed them heavily or shut them down. When the Black Death hit, physicians warned that hot baths opened the body to plague, so bathhouses closed en masse. The result? Europe leaned into being dirty, and not just camping trip dirty. We're talking years without full-body bathing, clothes worn until they stiffened, hair so matted it looked like felt, skin that developed its own ecosystem. You know that romantic medieval portrait you've seen in museums? Ignore it. Those artists lied for their patrons. A man passes you scratching vigorously under his tunic, and from the movement alone you know he's dealing with a louse colony the size of a small village. Medieval people called lice God's pearls, believing they were a natural byproduct of a healthy, warm body. If you had no lice, people wondered if you were sickly. Monks wrote entire treatises on how best to crush lice between their fingernails. Children picked nits off each other the way modern kids trade stickers. The sound of scratching was as common as the sound of birds. You glanced down at your own clothes. They were clean when you arrived, but you're already blending into the landscape. Dust clings to you immediately. A warm splash lands on your sleeve from an upper window, someone dumping their morning chamber pot, and now you smell like the street. Congratulations, you're officially medieval. But here's where things get even weirder. Despite this aversion to washing skin, people were obsessed, truly obsessed, with clean linens. Fresh underclothes were considered healthier than bathing, so instead of washing bodies, people washed shirts, hoping that the linen would pull impurities out through the pores. Changing your shirt was basically the medieval version of a shower. Rich folks changed them daily, poor folks weekly at best. But everyone agreed that a clean shirt was safer than clean skin. You'd see a duke proudly changing his undershirt in front of guests like it was a flex. And honestly, in that world it was. As you move through a residential alley, you hear the rhythmic thump of laundry being beaten against wooden boards. Women scrub fabric with a kind of determination that modern gyms wish they could bottle. That's because clothing absorbed sweat, dirt, fleas and odours like medieval Febreze, but without the freshening part. Washing linen was labour-intensive, often done with ashes or harsh lye that burned wrists and ate through fabric. But still, people did it constantly, because replacing the shirt was cheaper than healing a disease caused by washing your actual body. You pass a small shop where a barber surgeon hangs his tools beside his door. These men did a little of everything: shaving, surgery, tooth pulling, lancing boils. But one of their everyday tasks? Delousing clients. Medieval barbers used special combs to scrape lice from scalps, and they'd sometimes collect the critters in bowls to show how successful the appointment was. Think of it like a haircut, but instead of admiring your new style in a mirror, the barber shows you a bowl of squirming insects he took off your head. Your scalp starts to itch just imagining it. Too late. It's already happening. You try to ask someone where you might wash, maybe just your face, but the reactions are priceless. Some laugh as though you told a joke. Others raise eyebrows. One older woman genuinely looks frightened for you. She tells you that washing weakens the body, especially in winter, and that cold water shocks the blood. Warm water is even worse. It relaxes the skin too much. She advises you to take a dry cloth and rub vigorously instead. That's what she does on holidays, and she beams with pride as she says it. Walking farther, you come across a wooden tub sitting in the middle of a courtyard, filled with dark, lukewarm water. A family has just finished using it. Everyone from grandma to the toddler went in the same bath, in descending order of importance. The baby goes last when the water has achieved the consistency of stew. The phrase, "don't throw the baby out with the bath water," suddenly becomes very literal. You take one whiff and decide that if someone did dump the baby out, it might be kinder. The thing is, medieval dirtiness wasn't laziness. It wasn't even ignorance. It was a carefully crafted survival strategy based on the best medical knowledge they had. Clean skin was dangerous skin. Closed pores were armour. Lice were a sign of warmth. Sweat was the body pushing out impurities. Soap was harsh, rare, and sometimes made with animal fats and ashes that left skin raw. Staying dry and oily, that was the sweet spot. You pass a monk who smells strongly of incense and unwashed robes. Monastic rules often forbade bathing except on certain holy days. Some orders allowed foot washing, but only as a symbolic gesture, not a hygiene practice. Others said you could bathe if you were sick, but only if you asked permission first. Imagine requesting formal approval to take a bath, in writing, with a witness. Your journey takes you to a noble household where you expect better results. And yes, their linens are finer, their perfumes stronger, and their homes less smoky. But even wealthy families rarely bathe more than once or twice a year. Scented oils mask odours, hair is brushed daily but washed rarely, and everyone, from lord to servant, shares access to chamber pots, smoky fires and lice. The difference is that nobles can buy fancy combs and lavender satchels. But no amount of lavender can hide the smell of medieval summer, and as you walk through this world, itching, squinting through smoke, dodging chamber pot waterfalls, you realise that medieval Europe wasn't just dirty, it was proud of its dirtiness. People believed it protected them, strengthened them, marked them as pious, humble and healthy. In a world without germ theory, where plague, famine and war were daily realities, cleanliness was not a virtue. It was a threat. You shiver, not from cold, but from the knowledge that scratching at your collar is becoming a habit. Something just crawled under your shirt you don't want to check, you don't want confirmation. Welcome to medieval Europe. Bathing is suspicious. Filth is life. You push deeper into the medieval town just as the morning noise begins to swell into something else. An eerie mix of excitement, shouting, and the hollow clang of metal being dragged over cobblestones. People start moving in one direction, forming a loose, eager crowd, and before you can decide whether to follow, the current of bodies sweeps you along like driftwood in a river. You hear laughing, chatter, the crack of vendors opening their stalls early, and someone yelling that they're selling hot chestnuts while they're still warm. A young boy races past you waving a small wooden toy shaped like a gallows, the kind of souvenir you'd expect from a festival, not a killing. But that's exactly what you're walking toward. In medieval Europe, executions weren't just punishments, they were events, almost festivals, and everyone from children to grandmothers showed up early to get a good spot. You reach the town square and the first thing you notice is the wooden scaffold rising above the crowd like a stage waiting for performers. The executioner stands beside it, adjusting the rope with the calm professionalism of a man who knows he's the star attraction. People point at him, whispering, some impressed, others slightly afraid, all aware that being an executioner comes with its own strange mix of celebrity status and social isolation. The man wears leather gloves and a hooded cap, but his face isn't hidden. Medieval executioners didn't always wear masks. Often they showed their faces proudly. After all, this was a skilled job. It required precision. It required strength. It required not messing up in front of an entire town that expected a clean kill. And if he failed, the jokes he'd have to endure would last for weeks. Parents hoist children up onto their shoulders, not shielding their eyes but lifting them higher so they don't miss anything. A cheerful-looking woman offers you a meat pie, completely unfazed by the fact that the square is about to host a hanging. You decline, mostly because you can smell the questionable meat from where you stand. Still, the locals buy them quickly. Eating during an execution is not only normal but expected. It's part of the atmosphere. Another vendor sells mulled wine, promising it will warm your blood before the rope chills someone else's. Medieval humour isn't subtle. You try to understand how such a grim act became a casual pastime, and the truth is simple. Life in medieval Europe was harsh, short, and filled with danger. Public punishment wasn't just a spectacle, it was a lesson. The authorities wanted everyone to witness consequences. The crowd wanted distraction. Executions became both message and entertainment, something to break up the monotony of labour and the bleakness of uncertainty. When plague, famine and war loom constantly, watching the law assert order feels oddly comforting. The murmuring suddenly dims as guards drag the condemned man into the square. People lean forward like theatre-goers anticipating a dramatic monologue. Some spit, some cross themselves. A few shout insults at him, eager to show their moral superiority. You sense no hesitation, no discomfort, no moral debate about whether watching a man die is appropriate. This is simply what you do when there's an execution. A young girl near you asks her mother whether he'll dance when the rope tightens, and the mother answers matter-of-factly that it depends on his weight. You feel your stomach drop, because the girl doesn't ask in fear, she asks in curiosity. The condemned man stands trembling, hands tied, eyes darting across the sea of faces. The priest offers him a final chance to confess, and the crowd goes silent. This is a dramatic part of the show. People lean in, eager to hear whether he'll sob, deny everything, or proclaim his innocence. Medieval audiences love a good speech at the scaffold. It's the closest thing they have to live theatre. Some towns even keep records of especially memorable last words. Today, however, the man mumbles a short prayer instead. The crowd looks faintly disappointed. The executioner steps forward with authoritative calm, positioning the man beneath the rope. Several boys push through the crowd, wanting to stand closer. Their mothers don't stop them. One of the women next to you comments on how thick the rope looks, as though appraising knitting supplies. Another wonders if the executioner will let the body hang for an hour or two so people can inspect it afterward. That's normal too. After the hanging, townsfolk often approach the corpse to poke it, touch it, or even cut pieces of the rope for luck. Yes, luck. Rope from an execution was believed to have magical properties, used as a charm against illness, infertility, or bad spirits. The drumroll begins. The crowd hushes, but not out of respect, out of anticipation. The executioner adjusts the noose one final time. You brace yourself, thinking surely no one will cheer at a moment like this. But when the trapdoor drops, sending the condemned man plummeting, the audience erupts in noise. Gasps, laughter, a few scattered cheers. Someone shouts that the drop was clean. Another man announces loudly that the fellow died quicker than last week's victim. It's a comparison, like discussing the quality of a sports match. The whole thing lasts seconds, but the reactions spin out for minutes, energetic and unbothered. A boy in front of you pumps his fist in excitement. You can see he was hoping for a bit more thrashing, but this result is still respectable. Beside you, two elderly men analyse the executioner's technique the same way modern people critique a chef's seasoning. Could the rope have been adjusted differently? Was the height optimal? Did the executioner cut things too close with the knot placement? You hear one of them say that in the next town over, their executioner is so skilled he can snap a neck with one tug of the rope. You try very hard not to think about why this is something anyone would brag about. You notice the executioner stepping down from the scaffold, and instantly people approach him. Some ask questions, some congratulate him. A bold teenager requests to touch his gloves for luck. Another man hands him a small coin, not as a bribe, but more like a tip for a job well done. Executioners lived strange lives. They were respected for their skill, but also isolated because touching them was believed to bring bad fortune. Yet today he's a celebrity. The crowd wants what little glamour medieval Europe can offer. A group of musicians starts playing near the edge of the square. Children dance in circles. Vendors shout discounts on leftover pastries. The moment of death has passed, and the town transitions seamlessly into a lively market atmosphere, as though the execution simply kicked off the day's festivities. You can't help but think of modern amusement parks, where people shuffle from one attraction to the next without pausing to consider the absurdity of it all. As the body hangs overhead, swaying slightly in the breeze, townspeople begin lining up to get closer. Some bow their heads out of piety, others touch the wooden beams for protection from evil spirits. A few pickpockets slip through the crowd, using the distraction to their advantage. Medieval Europe is full of contradictions like this. Deep religious reverence paired with casual cruelty, community bonding mixed with violence, daily life intertwined with death. A woman near you tells her friend that next month's execution will involve a more dramatic method: burning. She sounds excited, as if discussing an upcoming festival. Burnings, she explains, draw even larger crowds. There are extra vendors, sometimes performers. If the condemned is especially hated, people bring things to throw into the flames. When the crimes are severe, the executioner might even use iron tongs to tear flesh from the victim before lighting the fire. She mentions all of this the way someone today might list the attractions at a seasonal fair. Her friend responds by saying she hopes there will be musicians afterward, because her cousin got married at the last burning and they're still talking about the dancing. You think the horror must end there, but the medieval imagination is much wider than you realised. Public dismemberments, quartering, boiling alive, each has its own audience and atmosphere. Hangings are considered mild, almost too ordinary to impress seasoned spectators. More exotic methods draw visitors from surrounding villages, turning executions into something like regional events. Roads fill, inns overflow, inns that also, by the way, force you to share beds with strangers, but that's a problem for later. The most unsettling part isn't the method of death, but the way the crowd treats it. They gossip, they laugh, they argue about details, they eat, they flirt, they make business deals. A travelling merchant nearby negotiates prices on a bolt of cloth. A young couple holds hands, using the crowded square as an excuse to stand closer than their parents would normally allow. A priest moves through the crowd offering blessings for a coin, leveraging the heightened emotions of the moment. Everyone participates in some way. It doesn't feel like cruelty to them. It feels like life continuing, like justice being served, like community gathering. You realise that in a world where violence is constant and law enforcement nearly non-existent, the spectacle of justice offers a sense of stability. When the law acts publicly, visibly, dramatically, it reassures people that there is order, that chaos can be contained. And if that reassurance comes bundled with entertainment, even better. The crowd eventually begins to thin. Children tug on their parents' sleeves, asking for sweets. You overhear a man promise his son that next week they might go watch a branding instead. The boy cheers. A woman sweeping outside her shop glances up at the hanging body and then returns to her chores as though glancing at the weather. You see a dog sniffing around the scaffold. Life flows on around death without missing a beat, and you, standing there in the fading excitement, realise just how normalised this all is. Medieval Europe does not hide death behind closed doors or sanitise it with euphemisms. It brings death into the daylight, elevates it onto a stage, invites everyone to witness it, and treats it as both lesson and leisure. It's unsettling, dizzying, and strange. But to them, it's ordinary. Just another day, just another body, just another reminder that justice here is loud, visible, and something you grow up watching from your mother's shoulders. You follow the thinning crowd back through the twisting medieval streets, still half dazed from the spectacle of the execution, but the day has no intention of giving you a break. As you move toward the marketplace, you notice a gathering forming near the town hall, a smaller but oddly focused crowd buzzing with anticipation. No drums, no vendors shouting about roasted chestnuts this time, just murmured gossip and the occasional burst of surprised laughter. People point toward the building with a mixture of amusement and seriousness, an unsettling combination that lets you know something strange is happening. You edge closer, expecting maybe a dispute between neighbours or a town meeting about taxes. And then you see it, a pig in a makeshift harness, being pulled by two guards toward the courthouse doors. The pig squeals indignantly, hooves scraping the ground while a clerk reads aloud from a parchment in a ceremonial tone. It takes you several seconds to process what you're seeing, because your modern brain fights the idea with every neuron. But medieval Europe doesn't care about your disbelief. This pig is on trial, not metaphorically, not symbolically. Fully, legally, officially, on trial. And the townspeople are taking it as seriously as the execution earlier, albeit with a little more humour in the mix. Parents lift their children to get a better look, but instead of lessons about justice, the kids giggle, wave and point at the animal with wide-eyed excitement. One boy announces that he thinks the pig looks guilty. His sister insists the pig is innocent because its ears are cute. The mother hushes them both, not because she disapproves of their commentary, but because the trial is about to begin and it's rude to talk over official proceedings. You squeeze into the back of the courthouse as the pig is led to the front where it's supposed to stand before the judge. Of course, the pig can't stand upright in any meaningful way, so the guards keep it in place while a clerk reads the charges with perfect seriousness. Theft, destruction of property, and the grievous injury of a farmer's child. Medieval courts didn't skip formality just because the accused didn't understand a word being said. Animals were considered moral agents capable of making choices, wrong choices, and therefore accountable under the law. If a pig bit someone, it wasn't just misbehaving, it was committing a crime. A man wearing a dark robe rises from a bench near the front. He clears his throat, adjusts his papers, and with full professional dignity announces that he is the defense lawyer. For the pig. Yes, the defense lawyer. You stare, waiting for someone to laugh or explain that this is satire, but no one does. This is as real as it gets. Medieval courts sometimes went so far as appointing public defenders for accused animals, especially pigs, horses, goats, or dogs. The reasoning was simple. Justice had to be fair. And even an animal deserved representation. Never mind that the client is currently trying to chew on the edge of the table. The lawyer begins with a speech about the accused's good character, its usefulness to the community, and the possibility that the injured child provoked the animal. He mentions that pigs, like all creatures, can be influenced by hunger, fear, or mistreatment, and therefore the court must consider the circumstances. It's a thoughtful argument, and if you ignore the snorting and squealing happening beside him, it could almost pass for a normal legal case. The prosecutor counters with stern indignation, calling the pig a creature of base nature, who committed its act with malicious intent. He gestures dramatically toward the animal, which responds by defecating on the floor, an act that in any other courtroom would undermine the defendant's dignity. But here seems more like part of the performance. Some spectators laugh, others roll their eyes and mutter that pigs always do that. A few argue quietly about whether the animal's behaviour is a sign of guilt or just nervousness. You suddenly understand why medieval trials could last days. Witnesses are called. The injured child's mother swears that the pig bit her son without provocation. The father insists he saw the pig lurking suspiciously near the fence. A neighbour testifies that the pig once knocked over a basket of apples, proving it has a history of mischief. Another neighbour, calling himself a character witness, argues that pigs are generally gentle and hard-working creatures, and that one bad moment shouldn't condemn this one to death. His tone suggests he's genuinely invested in the pig's fate. And then comes the strangest moment of all. The judge addresses the pig directly. He asks whether it has anything to say in its defence. The pig squeals loudly, jerking back from the guard's grip, and the crowd reacts as though this is meaningful testimony. A woman behind you whispers that the squealing sounds like denial. You wonder if she's joking, but she looks completely serious, even nodding to herself as though confirming a personal theory. Medieval Europeans believed animals could express guilt or innocence through behaviour, and they scrutinised every snort, grunt, twitch and shuffle. The pig, of course, is just being a pig, but here in this world its reactions carry weight. The judge reviews the testimony with solemn care. You can almost feel the tension as he deliberates, stroking his beard thoughtfully. Medieval judges weren't always foolish or superstitious. They understood symbolism and the need for public confidence in the legal system. Animal trials served a purpose, bizarre as it seems now. They created a sense of cosmic justice, showing that no creature was exempt from moral order. If an animal harmed someone, punishing it brought closure, reassured the community, and reinforced the idea that wrongdoing, any wrongdoing, must be addressed. Finally, the judge delivers his verdict. Guilty. The crowd murmurs in agreement. The sentence is announced. Death by hanging. You can't help but feel your jaw drop. Hanging. For a pig. But yes, that was common. Medieval executioners didn't limit themselves to humans. They hanged pigs, burned roosters, drowned dogs, and occasionally tortured goats. And if an animal's crime was especially heinous, the court might even dress it in human clothing before the execution, to further emphasise the moral seriousness of its wrongdoing. But the strangeness doesn't end there. While this pig's case is dramatic, it's not unusual. You learn quickly that medieval Europe tried a wide variety of animals for a wide variety of offences. Rats were summoned to court and formally warned to appear, or risk excommunication. When they inevitably failed to show up, lawyers argued, with impressive seriousness, that cats posed too great a danger for rats to travel safely. Courts sometimes accepted this argument. Roosters were put on trial for laying eggs, which people believed were tools of witchcraft. Horses were tried for trampling people. Dogs were executed for attacking nobles. Insects were put on trial for destroying crops. And in some regions, beetles or weevils were excommunicated. Yes, excommunicated, as though stripping them of spiritual membership might convince them to leave the village fields alone. You watch as the pig is led outside again, this time toward the scaffold that was used only hours earlier for a human. The crowd follows, smaller than the one for the execution but still enthusiastic. You hear people exchanging bets on whether the pig will kick violently or remain still. Children argue about who gets to collect a piece of the rope afterward. An older man speculates that hanging a pig will bring good harvest weather. A priest blesses the crowd, not the pig, reminding everyone that justice, even weird justice, is the will of God. The executioner seems less enthusiastic today. Hanging a pig is more physically awkward than hanging a man and less socially prestigious. Still, he must do it properly. A sloppy animal execution could bring mockery. He ties the rope with practiced efficiency, while townspeople push for a better view. The pig thrashes, the rope tightens, and the crowd reacts with the same mix of curiosity, satisfaction, and casual commentary you saw earlier with the human execution. The boundary between species, at least in terms of justice, is thin here. When it's over, people disperse again, returning to daily life as though nothing unusual has occurred. A few linger to cut off pieces of rope or touch the scaffold beams for luck. A merchant uses the event as a marketing opportunity, offering a discount on pork to anyone who has just witnessed justice. No one finds this tasteless. No one hesitates. In medieval Europe, symbolic punishment is both profound and profoundly strange. As you walk away, the absurdity settles into your bones. You came expecting hardship, danger, and discomfort, but not this legal theatre where animals participate in rituals they can't comprehend, where communities gather to judge creatures who act by instinct, where cosmic order is enforced through ceremonies that hover somewhere between superstition and bureaucracy. It's unsettling, almost surreal, and yet completely accepted by the people who live here. In medieval Europe, justice applies to all, even the pigs. You leave the scene of the pig's execution feeling like your brain is slowly melting, and as the afternoon sun warms the rooftops, you tell yourself things cannot possibly get stranger. But this is medieval Europe. Every corner promises something more unsettling than the last. As you walk along the muddy street, the bells of the parish church toll faintly in the background, mixing with the cries of merchants, the grunts of oxen, and the coughs of townspeople who sound like they've been inhaling chimney soot since birth. Your nose twitches at the familiar mix of smoke and refuse, but now there's another layer to it. A sharp, metallic tang of blood carried on the breeze. You follow it reluctantly, because at this point you know that anything attracting a crowd here is bound to be a spectacle of some kind. And sure enough, just outside a small wooden building with a red and white striped pole, a circle of people forms around a table stained a dark, permanent reddish brown. A barber surgeon is preparing his tools. If you were hoping for something gentle, stop hoping immediately. Medieval medical practice is a precise combination of guesswork, superstition, torture, and unwavering confidence. The barber surgeon dips a blade into a bucket of water that looks like it could give you 3 infections just by looking at it. He doesn't seem concerned. Sterilization isn't a concept yet. Germs don't exist here, at least not in the minds of the people treating you. Illness, they believe, is caused by imbalances in the body's humours, by foul air, by angry spirits, or by the alignment of the planets. So when a man with a pale face and trembling hands sits down on the bench, the barber surgeon barely asks 3 questions before announcing enthusiastically that the patient's humours need balancing, which is medieval code for, "I'm about to stab you." You watch as the barber surgeon ties a strip of cloth around the man's arm, muttering about excess blood causing lethargy. Bloodletting is the first line of defence against nearly everything: headaches, fevers, melancholy, indigestion, broken hearts. Doctors believe the body has 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile and black bile. And if one gets out of balance, you're doomed unless someone takes decisive action with a knife or a bowl of leeches. The surgeon makes a quick, practiced cut, and blood spills into a metal basin. The patient winces, gripping the edge of the bench while nearby spectators nod approvingly. A woman whispers that this exact procedure saved her cousin's life, though judging by the cough she's hacking up, it might not have worked quite so well for her. Once the basin is full enough to satisfy the surgeon's belief system, he wipes his hands, not on a towel, but on the apron he's definitely not washing anytime this month, and moves on to the next patient, who is waiting with a small vial of urine. Now, if you thought bloodletting was strange, brace yourself. Urine diagnosis is practically a medical art form here. Physicians and barber surgeons study the colour, smell, thickness, even the, brace yourself, flavour of urine to determine the patient's ailment. You quickly realise what's about to happen when the surgeon sticks a finger into the vial, lifts it to his mouth and gives it a contemplative sip. You react with every muscle in your modern body, but the crowd barely notices. To them, this is how you figure out what's wrong. The surgeon declares confidently that the patient suffers from an excess of cold humours, likely caused by damp weather or melancholy thoughts. The recommended treatment? More bloodletting, mixed with herbal poultices and possibly a prayer or two. The patient looks relieved, which tells you everything you need to know about how terrifying untreated illness is in this world. You continue moving through the marketplace, and the deeper you go, the more medieval medicine reveals its true chaotic nature. A group of villagers gathers around a travelling healer selling powdered unicorn horn to ward off disease. It's actually ground up animal bone, but no one here questions the difference. Another man sells vials of something he claims is distilled dragon's blood, which smells suspiciously like spoiled wine mixed with herbs. Farther down, a woman hawks charms meant to protect against demons that cause toothaches, nightmares, or childbirth complications. In medieval Europe, the line between medicine and magic is practically invisible. You step inside a dimly lit house to escape the noise, and immediately wish you hadn't. A physician is inside performing trepanation, literally drilling a hole into a man's skull to release evil spirits or built-up pressure. The patient lies rigid on a straw mattress, every muscle straining against the leather straps binding him. His breath comes in ragged gasps and his face glistens with sweat. The physician works methodically, pressing a metal trephine against the skull and twisting with slow, ruthless persistence. The scraping sound is sharp and nauseating. You want to look away, but the villagers watching don't flinch. Some whisper that this will cure headaches. Others murmur that it's the only way to save a man cursed by demons. A few children watch with morbid fascination, memorizing every detail the way modern children watch YouTube tutorials. When the trephine finally breaks through, a small circle of bone is removed, and the physician holds it up proudly like a craftsman showing off a well-made carving. The crowd nods in approval. The patient slips into unconsciousness, which everyone assumes is a sign that the evil has been successfully released. You know better, but here your knowledge is useless. Outside again, you encounter a woman carrying a basket filled with dead puppies. Before you can process what you're seeing, she arrives at a healer's stall where a man is crushing herbs with a mortar. She hands him one of the pups, and he nods solemnly. In medieval Europe, boiled puppy parts were used in ointments believed to cure everything from joint pain to blindness. It's unsettling to witness how casually life and death interact here, not out of cruelty, but necessity. Survival doesn't leave room for sentimentality when every winter threatens famine, and disease sweeps through towns like a scythe. You wander into a small apothecary shop, and the shelves reveal even more of the medieval imagination. Dried frogs, bezoars from animal stomachs, powdered mummy imported from the Middle East, vials of human fat obtained from executed criminals, jars of leeches, and bundles of herbs labelled for ailments both physical and spiritual. The apothecary explains that some illnesses must be treated with substances that have symbolic connections to the problem. If your heart aches, you use something from a heart. If your spirit feels poisoned, you use something dark or bitter. If a demon troubles you, you burn herbs believed to repel unclean forces. You glance at the ceiling, wondering if the smoke stains have stories of their own. But it's not just remedies that shock you, it's the utter confidence everyone has in them. No matter how painful, bizarre, or ineffective a treatment is, the practitioners perform it with unwavering certainty. Knowledge comes from ancient texts, religious teachings, and traditions passed from master to apprentice. A sick person will endure almost anything because the alternatives are worse. Lingering illness, spiritual danger, or the belief that your soul itself could become unbalanced and cursed. You pass a small chapel where a priest lays hands on a feverish man while chanting in Latin. Prayer is a treatment. Holy relics, teeth, bones, or clothing from saints are believed to cure disease. Sometimes the sick sleep beside tombs, hoping miraculous energy will heal them. Even the wealthiest families rely on relics, spells, astrology, and ritual purification as part of their medical plan. And then there are the physicians who rely on astrology. They draw up star charts to determine the best time to bleed a patient, when to administer herbs, and whether an illness was caused by a celestial misalignment. Some refuse to treat anyone during certain moon phases. You watch as one physician consults a chart before agreeing to see his next patient, mumbling about Saturn causing melancholy. The patient nods, completely accustomed to this logic. As the day stretches on, you see medicine blend seamlessly into superstition. A woman ties a scrap of red cloth around her baby's wrist to ward off the evil eye. A man hangs a bundle of garlic above his door to protect against plague. Children carry small carved amulets shaped like crosses, animals, or protective symbols. Every person here lives under constant threat. Sickness can strike at any moment, and without real medical knowledge, fear shapes their entire understanding of the body and the world. You sit down on a low stone wall, overwhelmed. The sounds of coughing, chanting, grinding metal, and boiling concoctions echo in your ears. People pass by carrying bundles of herbs, sacks of leeches, or blood-stained cloths. A healer shouts about a new treatment he's discovered, burning dried maggots to ash and mixing it with honey. Another promises that swallowing a ruby shard will bring strength back to weakened limbs, though if the shard stays in your stomach, that strength will never leave, because neither will the shard. You look around and realize that in medieval Europe, medicine is an unpredictable combination of faith, folklore, desperation, and sheer resilience. Every treatment hurts. Every remedy tastes foul, smells foul, or is made of something foul. And yet people cling to these practices because the world is dangerous, life is fragile, and hope, no matter how strange, keeps them alive. You step back into the open air, hoping desperately for a breeze strong enough to clear your senses after witnessing medieval medicine. But the moment you turn the corner, you regret that hope. Whatever faint wind there is carries the unmistakable scent of something warm, sour, and distinctly human. You cough, hand instinctively covering your nose, and for a second you convince yourself something must have died nearby. And then, as if on cue, a window above you bangs open. A woman leans out with a heavy ceramic pot in her hands, and she shouts, the warning that medieval city dwellers use the same way. Modern people honk their car horns. Gardy-loo. You don't even have time to ask what that means, because the moment the word leaves her mouth, the contents of the pot come sailing down toward the street. You barely dodge aside as a splash of dark, lukewarm liquid slams onto the cobblestones where you were standing. The woman doesn't apologize. The passers-by don't complain. This is normal. Chamber pots are emptied directly into the street, and you quickly learn that Gardy-loo roughly translates to look out for the water, which is an incredibly generous way of describing the mixture of urine, feces, food scraps, vomit, and used washing water raining down from medieval windows multiple times a day. You wipe your sleeve, but the smell clings stubbornly, announcing your slow transformation into a citizen of this world whether you like it or not. The street itself is a terrain of filth. The centre of the road sinks slightly lower than the sides, creating a natural channel for the waste runoff. It trickles constantly, forming a sluggish brown river that glistens in the sunlight. People step around it skillfully, used to the texture, the slipperiness, even the sound of it. Wooden walkways don't exist here. This is the path, and this is your life now. Children play on the edges, tossing pebbles into the muck as though it were harmless puddle water. Chickens scratch through it looking for food. Dogs sniff and roll in places you wish you'd never seen. And all around you, townspeople carry on with their day, completely indifferent to the fact that their shoes and skirts and even their hands brush against waste that looks one wrong step away from sentience. The smell isn't just unpleasant, it's overwhelming. A thick, layered odour made of everything humans can produce, cooked gently by the warmth of the sun, stirred by wagon wheels and trampling feet. You try to breathe shallowly, but the air is heavy and humid. No matter how careful you are, eventually you step in something soft and unpleasant. There is no path that avoids it. Medieval streets are living rivers of filth, and you are standing in the middle of it. You follow a group of people heading toward the riverbank, hoping the air might be a little fresher there. But the moment you arrive, you realise your mistake. The river serves as a giant sewer for the entire town. Chunks of refuse drift past. Rotted vegetables, animal innards, sodden cloth, and countless things you refuse to identify. People still gather here to wash clothes, fetch water, dump more waste, and even let animals drink from the edge. A woman scrubs a tunic vigorously, pausing only to shout at her child who is poking curiously at a floating fish carcass. Beside her, a man empties a bucket of human waste directly into the current with the casual grace of someone watering a plant. Two boys splash each other only a few feet away. They're laughing. They're having a good time. You stare, jaw tight, stomach twisting. If you weren't already aware that medieval lifespans were tragically short, this river alone would explain most of it. But the chaos doesn't stop there. A tanner works farther upstream, soaking hides in vats of urine, a standard practice since urine softens animal skins and helps loosen hair. You watch as a worker dumps several buckets of fresh urine into a wooden tub, and the smell hits you so hard you physically recoil. The tanner shrugs. It's just another normal day. In fact, urine is so valuable here that households save it in jars and sell it to tanners. You catch sight of a boy carrying a full jug to the workshop, whistling as if delivering bread. This is the medieval version of recycling. You make your way back into the maze of streets, stepping aside as a cart rattles past piled high with manure. The man driving it whistles cheerfully. He's not a farmer, he's a gong farmer, one of the night workers responsible for cleaning out cesspits and privies. Gong farmers are the unsung heroes of medieval sanitation, and their job is exactly as terrible as it sounds. They climb into cesspits with long shovels, wading waist-deep in centuries-old human waste that is compacted into a thick tar-like substance. They scoop it into carts and haul it outside the city walls, where it's often used as fertiliser, and while that job pays surprisingly well, it comes with laws requiring workers to labour only at night, since the daytime smell would be unbearable even by medieval standards. You pass a manhole-like wooden cover near a row of houses, and a faint, warm stench wafts upward. Beneath it lies a medieval cesspit, essentially a deep hole filled with layers of human waste from generations of residents. Some pits overflow in rainy seasons, contaminating wells and spreading disease. Others seep slowly into nearby basements, and when they fill completely, the gong farmers are summoned, working with lanterns, ropes, and shovels inside cramped, airless pits. You can hardly imagine a worse fate, yet medieval law demands someone do it. You watch as the cart of waste rumbles by again, leaving a trail of droplets behind. The townspeople step over them casually. A commotion draws your attention as a woman in a long skirt slips on the slick surface of the street and falls squarely into the central gutter. There's a collective gasp, followed by laughter. Two men rush to help her up, but they do so with the resigned acceptance of people who've seen this scenario 1,000 times. The woman scolds them for laughing, then wipes off her arms and continues walking, muttering about bad luck. You hesitate before continuing, because part of you is worried you're next. Every step on this street feels like walking across a medieval obstacle course, designed by someone with a grudge against cleanliness. You duck into a side alley hoping to escape the bustle, but even here, the walls are streaked with dark stains from chamber pots dumped carelessly over the years. The stones beneath your feet squish unpleasantly. You look up and realise that windows are stacked high above, some with pots resting precariously on their ledges, waiting for the next opportunity to be emptied. You move quickly. As you return to the main street, you spot a group of wealthy townspeople walking together, and you notice something strange. They're holding perfumed pomanders, small metal orbs filled with herbs, spices and flowers designed to mask foul odours. They bring them to their noses frequently, inhaling deeply as they pass through the stink of the city. Perfume isn't a luxury here, it's a survival tool. Wealthy women perfume their gloves, their scarves, even the hems of their gowns. Men wear scented beads, hoping to create small pockets of clean air around themselves. Poorer folks rely on rosemary or mint tucked into their clothes. You have nothing. You're breathing raw medieval Europe straight into your soul. Further ahead, a slurry of offal from the butcher's stall flows down the gutter in thick congealed streaks. The butcher dumps the leftover blood and guts from his morning work straight into the street, letting them mingle with everything else. Flies swarm in dense clouds. Cats lurk nearby, snatching scraps as they float by. Rats scamper between puddles, fat and thriving. One of them pauses to stare at you, completely unafraid. You shiver. Rats are the true rulers of medieval cities, and they know it. You stop at a small tavern hoping to rest your feet, but even here, the dirt and stink follow you. The floor is covered in rushes, straw mixed with herbs, meant to soak up spills, but you quickly notice they haven't been changed in months. Beneath the top layer is a thick black compost of old food, spilled ale, rodent droppings, and mould. People walk across it, grinding it into the floor. The tavern smells only slightly better than the street, mostly thanks to the smoke from a central hearth masking the real odour. You take a cautious seat, trying not to breathe too deeply. The tavern keeper brings you a mug of ale because drinking water here is a terrible idea. Water is pulled straight from rivers filled with sewage, so ale is safer, even for children. It's weak, cloudy and lukewarm, but it's the cleanest thing you'll drink today. As you sip, you hear townspeople discussing last night's Gong Farmer crew, praising them for clearing a massive cesspit behind the baker's shop. One woman mentions how relieved she is because the smell had gotten so bad her bread was starting to taste strange. You want to laugh, but then you remember that in this world, everything touches everything else. Filth isn't just around you. It gets into your clothes, your skin, your food, your breath. When you step outside again, the afternoon light casts long shadows through the street, highlighting the shimmering surface of the waste-filled gutter. A horse-drawn cart ploughs through it, splashing the walls with streaks of brown. People continue their lives unbothered. A friar walks through barefoot, chanting softly. A merchant rolls a barrel across the street without wiping it afterward. A child sits on the ground, eating bread with their fingers. None of them flinch. None of them question it. You realise that to medieval people, filth isn't just normal, it's unavoidable. The city breathes waste the way a forest breathes pollen, and as the next shout of "Gardy Lou" echoes overhead, you instinctively jump aside again, learning quickly that survival in medieval Europe means two things: watch the windows and accept the sewage. It's everywhere, it's in everything, and you're not leaving without taking some of it with you. You leave the reeking street behind and wander toward a quieter part of town, hoping desperately that the smell of sewage won't follow you. It clings to your clothes anyway, but at least the noise fades as you approach an open square where a crowd is forming, not with the rowdy energy of an execution or an animal trial, but with the hushed, nosy anticipation of people eager to witness something socially significant. You hear the low hum of conversation, parents whispering, matchmakers nodding approvingly, old women crossing their arms with the satisfaction of people about to watch a good transaction unfold. And it truly is a transaction, because today, in this little square, a medieval marriage agreement is about to be settled, And in this world, marriage is not a romantic moment, but a contract, an exchange of property, responsibilities, and strategic alliances. You take a step closer, curiosity tugging you forward, and find yourself watching two families facing each other. The girl no older than 12, the boy perhaps 14, standing stiffly as their parents negotiate behind them. The children's expressions make it painfully clear that this has nothing to do with their wishes. Their possessions, bargaining chips, pieces in a family's plan for survival and status. The girl's father presents a dowry, a chest containing linens, 2 silver spoons, a patch of farmland, and a promise of 3 goats once she completes her first year in her new household. The boy's father examines each item with the same seriousness a merchant applies when checking the quality of imported goods. The girl stares at the ground, twisting a scrap of cloth in her hands, while her mother nudges her to look up and smile obediently. This is normal. In medieval Europe, childhood is short, and marriage can arrive before adulthood even begins. Betrothals often take place when children are barely old enough to read, if they can read at all. You hear one of the neighbours whisper proudly that her own marriage was arranged when she was 9, and the match turned out better than expected, which doesn't say much, given the low bar medieval couples set for marital satisfaction. As the families finalise the agreement, a priest steps forward to bless the union, not because the couple is marrying today, but because the church must oversee every step of this process. The priest reminds both families of the rules regarding consanguinity, ensuring the children are not too closely related. Medieval canon law prohibits marrying close kin, not for genetic reasons, but because the church wants to control alliances and prevent powerful families from consolidating too much influence. The priest's recitation is long and dry, but the crowd listens as if this is the dramatic climax of the event. Once he finishes, the parents shake hands, and the children are officially betrothed. They will marry when they are old enough, which could mean next year, depending on local custom and parental ambition. You step away from the crowd, disturbed yet fascinated. In medieval Europe, marriage is rarely about love. It's a business agreement, a social necessity, a way to secure labour, land, alliances, and heirs. Romantic affection is not required. In fact, people are often suspicious of marriages based on love, fearing that passion clouds judgment. Stable marriages come from practicality, predictability, obedience, and clearly defined roles. And those roles are strict. A wife must obey her husband, manage the household, bear children, hopefully sons, and maintain the family's reputation. A husband must provide, protect, enforce discipline, and ensure the household follows church doctrine. If love grows later, that's a bonus, but no one expects it. You wander through the town and soon find yourself at a bustling market, where you notice a commotion that looks different from the others. At the centre of the crowd stands a man with a rope around the wrist of a woman, leading her toward the auction block. The crowd isn't shocked, they're curious. You hear someone whisper that the man is about to sell his wife. Not divorce her, not petition the church for annulment, sell her. In some parts of medieval Europe, particularly in rural communities or among lower-class families, wife selling becomes an unofficial method of ending a marriage when legal separation is too expensive or impossible. The man leads the woman to the block, lifts her arm like a merchant displaying livestock, and announces her qualities. She is hard-working, can cook well, and has a mild temper. The woman stands dutifully as though she's resigned to her fate. A few bidders shout numbers, one offers a goat, another offers a sack of grain. Finally, someone offers enough coin to satisfy the husband, and the transaction is sealed. The woman goes with her new husband, not as property in the eyes of the law, but as an informal, socially accepted arrangement the community tolerates because it solves a problem without involving church courts. You stare, stunned, but here nobody bats an eye. Just when you think you've seen enough bizarre marital customs, you hear loud cheering coming from a hall near the town church. It takes a moment for you to understand what's happening, but once you see the decorated room and the cluster of people waiting outside the door, you realise you've stumbled upon a medieval bedding ceremony. The couple, newly married, has just finished their wedding feast. Now comes the public confirmation that the marriage will be physically consummated. The bride and groom, looking both embarrassed and resigned, are walked through the hall by their families. The crowd follows them into a small bedroom where the couple climbs into bed under the watchful eyes of parents, a priest, and half the town's gossip network. The priest blesses the bed. The families joke loudly about fertility. People toss flowers and sometimes even grain as a symbol of future abundance. And yes, medieval communities may stay in the room until the couple is lying down together, sometimes even waiting for proof of consummation. Privacy is not part of medieval marriage. You retreat quickly from the hall, your cheeks burning on the couple's behalf. As you walk down the street trying to scrub the last 10 minutes from your memory, you overhear two older women discussing the church's strict rules on marital relations. For all the lack of privacy, the number of allowed days for intimacy is surprisingly limited. The church forbids relations on holy days, feast days, Sundays, Fridays, Lent, Advent, and during a woman's menstrual cycle. One of the women jokes that by the time you subtract all the forbidden days, couples are lucky to have a dozen opportunities a year. Her friend laughs and says that's more than enough for her. The conversation shifts to the sin of lust, the requirement to perform marital duties without excessive passion, and the warnings priests give about the dangers of unrestrained desire. You realise that not only is marriage business, but pleasure is something to be carefully controlled. Farther down the road, you pass a young man pacing nervously near a doorway. He tells a friend he's afraid his marriage might be annulled because it wasn't consummated. The church requires physical proof that a marriage has begun properly. Without that, the union can be invalidated. The friend claps him on the shoulder and tells him to drink strong wine, muttering that half the men in town owe their marriages to last-minute liquid courage. You see the stress etched into the young man's face. In this world, marriage is not just a private relationship, it's a public expectation tied to honour, lineage, and survival. You reach the outskirts of town where rural families live, and their marriages reflect a different kind of pressure. In poor households, marriage is essential for practical reasons. A woman becomes a labour partner. She helps in the fields, manages livestock, cooks, sews, and raises children who will one day work alongside their parents. A husband brings strength, protection, and access to communal resources. Marriage is survival. Couples often work side by side from dawn to dusk, bonded more by shared hardship than by affection. Their lives are so demanding that romance simply doesn't have room to exist. You watch a young couple carrying water from a well, barely speaking but moving in sync like two people who know their entire lives depend on cooperation. You pause as church bells ring, signalling a new hour. A procession walks by, a noble couple accompanied by attendants. Their marriage is arranged not by families in a marketplace but by political necessity. Noble marriages aren't about goats or grain, they're about land, alliances and wealth. You overhear that the bride is 16 and the groom nearly 40, a common age mismatch among noble families. Their union will shape regional politics, maybe even influence wars. The bride looks regal, but her eyes show a quiet resignation shared by countless others. She's a bargaining tool in a world built on power. As the sun sets, casting long shadows across the medieval rooftops, you find yourself reflecting on everything you've seen. The bargaining, the betrothals, the wife selling, the public rituals, the restrictions, the duties. Marriage here isn't about two people choosing each other. It's about families, survival, and tradition. Love isn't forbidden. It just isn't expected. And in this world of hardship, disease, short lifespans, and constant uncertainty, perhaps expecting love is a luxury medieval people can't afford. For them, marriage isn't a dream, it's a duty. You leave the uncomfortable world of medieval marriage behind and wander through the town with the hope, however faint, that the next corner will offer something normal. But this is medieval Europe, and normal is a word that means nothing here. As you walk past rows of wooden houses with crooked beams and smoke-stained roofs, a new sound reaches you. A sharp, sudden yelp followed by laughter and applause. It's not the sound of someone being punished, or a crowd witnessing an execution. It's something more casual, almost festive. Curious and cautious in equal measure, you follow the noise into a small square bustling with activity. The first thing you notice is a sign painted with a red and white spiral pole. The second thing you notice is the barber surgeon standing beneath it, holding a pair of iron pliers the way a modern dentist might hold a delicate instrument, except nothing about these pliers looks delicate. They look like they were designed for repairing horseshoes, and judging from the bloodied cloth at his feet, they've seen a lot of action today. A man sits on a stool in front of the barber surgeon, gripping the arms so tightly his knuckles shine white. He leans back with his mouth open, and even from where you stand you can see the problem. His teeth are blackened, crumbling, and badly infected. Medieval dental care is a nightmare so consistent it could be a genre. Sugar is a luxury in most regions, available mainly to nobles and wealthy merchants. Those who can afford it use it lavishly, on pastries, wines, candied fruits, never realizing that the sweet treat they love is destroying their teeth faster than any plague. For the poor, the problem is different but equally dire. Diets filled with coarse bread, grit-filled flour and tough meat grind down enamel until teeth look like broken pottery. The barber surgeon nods to the crowd, grips the man's head, and inserts the iron tool into his mouth. The man jerks instinctively, but helpers hold his shoulders tight. There is no anaesthetic. None, not even herbal numbing. Painkillers are rare, expensive, and usually useless. Most people in this era embrace pain as an unavoidable part of life. The barber gives a quick twist, then a hard, merciless yank. The sound is wet and sickening. The man screams, his voice cracking, and the tooth finally comes free with a spray of blood that spatters the ground. The crowd erupts in cheers, as if someone just won an arm wrestling contest. The man slumps forward, dizzy, clutching his jaw while the barber casually tosses the bloody tooth into a bucket filled with others. The barber wipes his hands on his apron, an apron already decorated with stains from countless extractions, and moves on to the next patient with the same cheerful energy you might expect from a festival vendor. He's offering haircuts, small surgeries, and tooth pulling all in the same spot. Medieval barbers are multitaskers by necessity. Surgery is not a respected medical specialty here. Real physicians prefer to read ancient texts rather than get close to blood. So the barber surgeons do the dirty work, cutting out infections, draining abscesses, stitching wounds, and of course, ripping out teeth that have long since given up hope. You glance around the crowd and notice something surprising. Most people are smiling, or at least what passes for smiling. Their teeth are in such poor condition that even a grin looks like a grimace. You see men with only 2 or 3 teeth left, women whose gums are swollen and red, children already showing signs of decay. Oral hygiene in medieval Europe is minimal. People brush their teeth with rough cloths or chew herbs to freshen their breath. But real cleaning is rare. Toothbrushes don't exist. Toothpaste is made from ashes, salt, crushed mint, or sometimes powdered charcoal. While these mixes help with smell, they do little to prevent rot. A young woman steps forward next, her hand trembling slightly as she points to a molar buried deep in her jaw. She explains that she hasn't slept in a week from the pain. Her face is puffy and her breath is sour with infection. The barber examines her quickly, nods and signals for her to sit. The crowd murmurs sympathetically, but no one looks away. Watching tooth extractions is prime entertainment, less dramatic than executions, less bizarre than animal trials, but still satisfying in a grisly communal sort of way. You can't help noticing that many spectators touch their own cheeks or jaws as they watch, silently grateful it isn't their turn yet. The barber positions the iron pliers again, braces a foot against the woman's knee for leverage, and pulls. The woman shrieks so loudly you feel it vibrate in your bones. The barber doesn't stop. He twists harder. The sound of grinding bone and tearing flesh makes your stomach churn, but medieval teeth don't come out easily. Many are fused to inflamed gums that cling stubbornly. On the third violent tug, the tooth breaks free, roots and all. The crowd cheers again. The woman sobs in relief, her hand pressed against her bleeding mouth. Her friend gives her a cloth soaked in wine to help numb the pain. Wine is one of the few widely available anaesthetics, though its numbing effect is mild compared to the agony of extraction. As the barber turns to sharpen one of his smaller knives on a whetstone, a local merchant approaches him to discuss the latest trend among nobles, blackening teeth intentionally. You blink, sure you misheard, but the merchant explains proudly that in some regions, having black teeth is a sign of wealth. Sugar is so expensive and so rare that only the wealthy can afford enough to rot their teeth. So blackened teeth become a fashion statement, proof of luxury, indulgence, and refined taste. Poor families sometimes use soot or herbs to dye their teeth darker so they can mimic the upper class. The irony is staggering. In a world where most people's teeth rot out from malnutrition, the rich rot theirs on purpose to show off. You continue walking through the town, noticing how common dental misery is. Every alley, every shop, every tavern holds people rubbing their jaws or complaining about toothaches. Some suffer in silence, unwilling to face the barber's pliers. Others chew on cloves or mint leaves, hoping to dull the pain. A man selling apples bites into one and 3 teeth loosen visibly. He spits them out casually, unfazed. Tooth loss is so normal that people adjust to it with surprising ease. Elderly people accept their soft, mushy diets. Parents expect their children to grow up with a handful of teeth at best. Near the church you encounter a small gathering around a monk holding a jar filled with leeches. He offers them as a cure for gum infections, explaining that leeches can draw out bad blood. He applies one to a man's swollen gum line, and you watch with a mix of horror and fascination as the leech latches on and begins to swell. Blood drips down the man's chin. The monk chants a prayer, insisting that the leech will restore balance to the man's humours. The patient nods, tears in his eyes, not from spiritual devotion but from sheer agony. Medieval medicine offers many forms of pain, but relief is rare. Another man approaches carrying a pouch of herbs, asking the monk to bless them for use in a dental poultice. The herbs include sage, mint, rosemary and crushed garlic, common remedies believed to draw infection out from inside the tooth. People mix herbs with honey or vinegar and apply the paste directly to the gums. Sometimes the mixture feels soothing, sometimes it burns, sometimes it infects the wound more. But people here try anything, because the alternative is losing teeth one by one, until eating becomes nearly impossible. Wandering into a wealthier part of town, you find nobles who suffer from different kinds of dental problems. Their diets are richer, more sugar, more dried fruits, more sweet wines, and their teeth rot in elegant patterns. A noble woman you pass covers her smile with a lace veil, embarrassed by her decaying molars, but even she prefers the barber surgeon to a physician. A physician would only prescribe herbs or complex purgatives, citing humoral imbalance. The barber will at least remove the problem directly. Painful, yes, but effective in its own brutal way. Children here suffer the most. A little girl sits on a doorstep crying quietly as her mother tries to soothe her. Her cheeks are swollen, her gums bleeding. The mother applies a hot cloth soaked in salt water, whispering prayers. She can't afford the barber surgeon. Her daughter must endure the pain until the tooth rots enough to fall out on its own, or the infection takes her life. Childhood is short and cruel in this world, and something as simple as a tooth infection can be fatal. You feel a knot tighten in your throat as the girl cries, and you try not to think about how many children die from things we consider minor inconveniences today. You eventually find yourself at a small outdoor stall where a healer offers preventive treatments. His table is covered in powders, pastes and tinctures meant to strengthen teeth or ward off decay. You examine one of the jars, reading its label, burned eggshell mixed with ashes and vinegar. Another jar contains a mixture of crushed animal bones. The healer assures customers that these powders will fortify the teeth like stone. People buy them eagerly, hoping to avoid the barber's pliers. Prevention in medieval dentistry is more hopeful than scientific, but hope is a powerful force in a place where real medical knowledge is scarce. As evening approaches, the barber surgeon packs up his tools, rinsing them briefly, not to sterilise them, but to remove blood and debris before the next day's work. He laughs with customers, pockets coins and waves goodbye. He's not seen as a torturer or a butcher. He's a hero, a necessary figure in a world where teeth rot quickly and pain is constant. His methods are brutal, but so is everything here. Walking through the dimming streets, you realise that in medieval Europe, dental suffering is universal. No one escapes it. The rich rot their teeth with sugar. The poor grind them down with coarse bread. Children get infections. Adults lose teeth. Elders gum their food. And the only solution is a man with iron pliers, a steady hand, and absolutely no fear of blood. By the time night falls, you're rubbing your own jaw without realising it, silently grateful for every dental appointment you've ever complained about in your life. In this world, even smiling hurts. You move through the darkening medieval streets with the sinking realisation that every step forward reveals some new horror or oddity that people here regard as ordinary life. The sky is beginning to dim into a bruised purple, smoke rising from chimneys in thick streaks that blend into the dusk. Children are being called indoors, merchants shuttering stalls and taverns spilling warm light onto the road as people gather for evening ale. You're exhausted, filthy, paranoid about rats, haunted by tooth-pulling, and now faced with the final challenge of the day, finding a place to sleep. In the modern world, you'd expect a room, a bed, maybe clean sheets, but nothing about this place has prepared you for medieval expectations. Lodging is not a private affair. Privacy is practically a myth. And as night folds over the town, you learn very quickly that sleeping arrangements here will test your comfort more than anything else so far. It begins when you push open the door of a roadside inn, its wooden sign creaking overhead. Inside, the air is thick with smoke, laughter, spilled ale, and the comforting smell of hot stew. Comforting only until you remember how dirty the kitchen probably is. A crowd of travellers fills the main room, some eating, some drinking, some dozing in corners. A few glance at you with mild curiosity. You approach the innkeeper, a stout man with a stained apron and a face that looks carved from seasoned oak. He sizes you up, then shrugs and asks how many people you're travelling with. When you explain you're alone, he laughs. Alone or not, he says, you'll be sharing a bed tonight. House is full, always is. Before you can protest, he waves you toward a narrow staircase leading to the upper floor. The creaky boards above you sound like a choir of distressed mice. You climb the stairs, heart pounding as you brace for whatever medieval hospitality has in store. At the top, the hallway stretches before you, dim, smoky, lined with doors that don't quite close. The innkeeper points you toward one and tells you to make yourself comfortable. You push the door open and immediately freeze. Inside are 3 beds, large straw mattresses stuffed with hay, covered in blankets that look as though they were washed sometime during the previous century, and all 3 are occupied. One bed holds 2 snoring men curled back to back. Another bed has a woman and 2 children sleeping in a jumble of limbs. The third bed, the only one with room left, contains a man sprawled across one hearth, snoring with the ferocity of a dying bear and smelling strongly of onions and ale. The innkeeper gestures for you to climb in beside him. You stare. He nods. Cheapest bed in town, he says proudly, as though this is a selling point. You step inside slowly, remembering that this is totally normal for the medieval world. Inns do not offer privacy. Renting a room means renting a space in a bed, not the entire bed. Travellers share mattresses with complete strangers all the time. In fact, sleeping alone would seem suspicious. Why would someone pay for an entire bed unless they were hiding something or had more money than sense? Even wealthier travellers sometimes double up, though at least they get feather mattresses. Most people get straw, and this straw is flattened, itchy, and undoubtedly home to a thriving community of bedbugs. You sit carefully on the edge, sending up a puff of dust that makes you cough. The snoring man rolls over and opens one bleary eye. For a terrifying moment you think he's going to protest your presence, but instead he grunts approval. Warmth, he mutters, pulling the thin blanket over both of you. It takes a moment to realise he isn't being friendly. He's stating a fact. Sleeping beside another person is a way to stay warm in drafty medieval houses where fireplaces are small and insulation non-existent. Human body heat is the medieval version of central heating. Everyone relies on it. Families, travellers, strangers. It's practical, and it makes your skin crawl. You lie stiffly, trying to keep your hands close to your chest as you adjust to the reality that you are sharing a bed with a man you've never met. You're doing exactly what millions of medieval people have done, surrendering personal space for warmth, safety, and lodging. But just as you're starting to settle into the worst bed of your life, the innkeeper reappears and cheerfully announces that you forgot something important. He gestures toward your clothing. "Take those off before you sleep," he says. "You'll ruin the bedding." You blink at him, wondering if this is a joke. It's not. In medieval Europe, sleeping naked, or nearly naked, is common. Clothing is expensive, hard to clean, and used sparingly. People don't want to sweat into their clothes at night because washing them is a nightmare. So in many places, especially in colder regions, people remove most or all of their clothing before climbing into bed. Not because they want to, but because it's practical. Clothes stay cleaner, bedding stays warmer, laundering is saved for emergencies. And so the innkeeper stands there expectantly while you mentally panic. The snoring man beside you is already wearing little more than a linen shirt, and he looks at you as though you're the strange one for keeping your tunic on. You pretend not to hear. The innkeeper shrugs and leaves, muttering something about foreigners with strange habits. You dare not move, terrified of attracting more attention, so you lie there fully dressed, sweating beneath the blanket, praying no one asks again. And just when you think you've reached peak discomfort, the door bursts open. 2 giggling young men stumble inside, clearly drunk, and the innkeeper guides them to your room. There is no space left in the beds. You already know what's coming. The innkeeper surveys the room, points to your bed, and says the dreaded words, "Shift over." Before you can protest, both men flop down at the foot of the mattress, legs hanging off the edge, snoring within minutes. You're now sharing your sleeping space with 3 strangers who smell like ale, sweat, fish, and the general despair of medieval hygiene. The mattress groans under the weight. You can feel the warmth of their bodies pressing against you from every angle. Your brain begs you to run, but your body knows there's nowhere else to go. You're trapped in a human sandwich made of strangers. Eventually you accept the inevitable and close your eyes. You try not to think about lice, fleas, or the small tickle you felt beneath your collar earlier. Bedbugs are common in every household, no matter how wealthy. Lice infest everything: hair, clothes, blankets. Fleas jump from person to person in the night. You remember that medieval people sometimes slept with small candles burning in hopes of discouraging vermin. Unfortunately, this often led to fires. You decide to take your chances with the bugs. As you lie there, you become aware of the constant background noise of medieval sleep. Teeth grinding, soft whimpers, the flapping of a mouse scurrying along the rafters, the cough of someone with chronic lung disease seeping through the wall. Medieval towns are loud. Silence is rare. Someone clears their throat. Someone snores so loudly the rafters tremble. Someone mutters in their sleep. You lie there trying not to scream. But not all medieval sleeping arrangements are chaotic inns. The next morning, after the most restless night of your life, you wander through the fields outside town and discover a peasant cottage. A family welcomes you warmly, offering you breakfast in exchange for a bit of help hauling water. Inside their cottage, you see their own sleeping arrangements, and they are not much better. The entire family shares one bed, a large wooden frame filled with straw or feathers if they're lucky. Parents and young children sleep together for warmth. Older children sleep beside siblings or grandparents. There is no privacy. Curtains hanging from the bedposts offer illusion more than separation. One family member rolls over, and the whole bed shifts with them. You marvel at how they make space for everyone. You later meet a courting couple who tell you about a practice called bundling, a romantic ritual that medieval communities used to allow young lovers to spend the night together without risking scandal. The couple climbs into bed fully clothed, or sometimes sewn into bags or wrapped in tight sheets that keep their bodies apart. Parents supervise the process, the entire household listens in, and the rules are strict. Talk, bond, maybe cuddle a little, but no physical relations. They show you the bundling board, a wooden plank laid between them to ensure distance. Sometimes the plank is so narrow it might as well not exist, but it's the intention that counts. You stare, stunned, imagining a world where your romantic privacy is monitored by your future in-laws. You also learn that in some regions, especially in colder climates, travellers sleep side by side in barns with shepherds, hired hands, and livestock sharing the warmth. Horses huff softly beside sleeping men. Goats bleat in the night. Chickens roost in the rafters. One shepherd proudly explains that sleeping with cows is wonderfully warm in winter. You politely decline the offer. Everywhere you go, the message is the same. Medieval sleeping practices are communal, intimate, and entirely devoid of privacy. People share beds because they must. Financially, physically, socially. They sleep naked or nearly naked because clothing is precious. They sleep with strangers because inns can't afford to waste space. They sleep in groups because warmth is survival. What you see as horrifying, they see as practical. As night falls again, and the innkeeper asks whether you want the same bed as yesterday, you answer with a hollow laugh, fully aware that this world has beaten your last shred of modern comfort out of you. Sleeping in medieval Europe is not peaceful. It's crowded, sweaty, loud, itchy, and profoundly humbling. And yet the people here drift off easily, accustomed to the chaos of shared lives. You lie down beside strangers once more, close your eyes, and surrender to the reality that in medieval Europe, privacy is the true luxury, one you'll never truly have. Morning arrives with a heaviness that feels carved into your bones. You didn't sleep so much as drift in and out of consciousness, while strangers breathed on you, rolled over you, and twitched beside you. The inn's common room smells like stale ale, burnt porridge, and damp wool. But at least the air moves a little, stirring the smoke into soft spirals that disappear through cracks in the roof. Your stomach rumbles, not politely either, but loudly enough that a few people glance over with sympathy. Hunger is no stranger here, and as you step outside, rubbing your gritty eyes, you realise that you've entered a place where hunger shapes everything. How people cook, store food, eat, and even think about what counts as edible. Starvation is never far away in medieval Europe, and that constant fear produces culinary habits that would horrify anyone from the modern world. Here, food preservation doesn't mean keeping things fresh. It means disguising the fact that the food stopped being fresh a long, long time ago. You head toward the market square, following the sounds of vendors shouting prices and the rhythmic thud of cleavers cutting into meat. The smell is familiar yet different. Rich, heavy, earthy, and sour all at once. You quickly realise why. The butcher's stall is displaying cuts of meat that no refrigeration system in existence could bring back from the brink. The meat ranges from red and moist to grey and slimy. Some pieces have visible discoloration, others look suspiciously glossy, and a few are covered with enough spices to make them unrecognisable. Medieval butchers rely on smoke, salt, and guesswork to preserve meat. Without cold storage, meat spoils within days, sometimes hours, especially in summer. So, people learn to eat right at the edge of decay, trusting their stomachs and adding enough spices to keep themselves from gagging. One butcher lifts a slab of beef and gives it a hearty sniff, then nods with approval. You nearly choke at the smell drifting your way, but the customers don't react. They buy their cuts, confident that a long boil, a heavy stew, or enough spices will make the meat edible. Saffron, cinnamon, ginger, cloves. These spices are expensive imports, luxuries reserved for the wealthy. Yet ironically, they're used not to elevate fresh food, but to mask rot. Spices become a culinary bandage, treating the nose more than the gut. You move toward a pot of stew simmering over an open flame, and one glance tells you it's seen better days. The ingredients boil into a thick, murky consistency. A woman stirs it with a wooden spoon that has probably never been washed since it was carved. The stew is perpetual. It never fully empties. Families add scraps of yesterday's stew plus today's leftovers, plus whatever questionable meat they can afford. It's a living, bubbling timeline of past meals and future indigestion. You step back quickly as the butcher tosses a pile of trimmings onto the table. He will sell every part: organs, intestines, feet, even the snout. Wealthier households might splurge on whole cuts, but the poor depend on offal, cheap, plentiful and quick to spoil. A woman nearby haggles for a pig's stomach, planning to stuff it with oats and onions for a dish that will stretch one piece of meat into several meals. She mentions that her children stopped complaining about the taste months ago. Hunger has a way of making anything palatable. As you walk deeper into the market, you pass stalls selling fish. The fish lie on wooden boards, their glassy eyes clouded, their flesh glistening with an oily sheen that makes your stomach twist. Some still have scales clinging loosely, others show signs of early decomposition. But no one here is fooled. They know the fish isn't fresh. Fresh fish appears only in coastal towns or wealthy kitchens. Inland markets rely on salted, dried or smoked fish brought in over long distances. You watch a man handle a cod that cracks like old parchment when bent. He soaks it in water that quickly turns cloudy, then nods approvingly. He'll cook it with mustard seeds to hide the smell. You can't help but marvel at the medieval stomach. It isn't just strong, it's practically forged from iron. Near the fish stall you see bread for sale. It looks inviting from afar, but up close you notice something strange. The colour isn't quite right. Poor families rarely eat pure wheat bread. Flour is expensive and wheat is often reserved for the wealthy. The bread you're looking at is a mixture of wheat, rye, barley, and whatever fillers the baker had available. Leftover bran, crushed beans, and often sawdust or chalk to stretch the dough. Bread becomes a sponge for contamination. Mice nibble on stored grain. Insects burrow through it. People pick them out casually, too hungry to waste food. Even when the bread is freshly baked, it hides things you'd rather not think about. One child bites into a loaf, pulls out a living beetle, tosses it aside and keeps eating as though nothing happened. You swallow hard, suddenly aware of every crumb you've eaten in your own lifetime. At another stall, trenchers are stacked high. These thick slabs of stale bread serve as medieval plates. People pile meat, vegetables and sauces onto them, letting the bread soak up the juices. At the end of the meal, they either eat the trencher, now flavoured with all the spices and fats they can't afford to waste, or give it to the poor or the animals. But these trenchers often sit for days before use, and by the time someone takes a bite, they're crawling with bugs. You hear one merchant brag that his trenchers are extra firm, which is medieval code for these could double as roof tiles. Farther down the square you find barrels of salted pork. The barrels are enormous, filled with brine that has long since turned cloudy and thick. Workers pull the meat out with hooked tools, and it comes up stiff, pale and stringy. Salt is precious, used for preserving everything from meat to vegetables, but even heavy salting can't stop spoilage entirely. Salted pork often smells sour, and people know this, but for winter survival, salted meat is essential. Villagers resalt it, soak it, boil it, and pray it lasts until spring. The alternative is famine. A man standing beside the barrels tells a group of buyers how to rehydrate their salted meat properly. Soak it overnight, boil it twice, then stew it with onions so you don't taste the salt or the rot. You pretend to listen, but focus mostly on keeping your stomach from turning. You weave past women selling root vegetables, carrots, leeks, onions, parsnips. These you trust more. They keep well in cold cellars and don't spoil as quickly. But even here you notice soft spots, bruises, mould creeping across skins. People cut off the worst parts and use the rest. Waste is not an option. Food is survival. Rot is simply part of the process. Next to the vegetables, barrels of ale and mead line the walkway. You already know drinking water is dangerous, so ale is the daily drink for everyone, children included. But the ale itself can spoil. When it does, people add herbs or spices to salvage it. Medieval drinking habits are a constant balancing act between thirst and the risk of dysentery. You take a sip of ale offered by a friendly vendor. It tastes yeasty, bitter, and faintly metallic, but at least it won't kill you immediately. As you continue exploring, You reach a large table displaying preserved foods, dried apples, smoked pears, and leathery strips of fruit paste called comfits. They look innocent enough, but dried fruits are prone to mould. Some pieces show white fuzz. The vendor brushes it off casually and sells them to a woman who doesn't even glance. In this world, you don't reject food for minor issues. You only reject it if it's actively screaming. Walking further, you stumble upon the house of a wealthy merchant. His servants carry baskets of ingredients into his kitchen: imported spices, dried figs, expensive sugar, almonds, raisins, candied orange peel. The rich have access to better ingredients, but ironically, even their kitchens disguise rot. Sweet wine masks sour meat. Spiced sauces cover unpleasant scents. The cook stirs a pot of highly seasoned game meat that was probably hanging too long in the larder. He tastes it, adds more cinnamon, nods with satisfaction. For the wealthy, rotting food becomes luxurious if you drown it in flavour. You wander into the kitchen yard where carcasses hang from hooks. Some drip blood, others drip something else. The cook explains that meat is aged to improve tenderness. You nod slowly, trying not to look directly at the flies. The cook lifts a goose, presses the flesh, and declares it ready. Not because it's fresh, but because it's just rotten enough to be soft. A servant passes by carrying a clay jug of milk. You open your mouth to ask why it smells sour, then realise the answer. Milk spoils fast. Medieval people turn it into cheese as soon as possible, but until then, they drink it slightly fermented, sometimes curdled. Fresh milk almost doesn't exist outside farms. Sour milk is simply milk. You're pulled toward a baker's stall by the smell of something sweet. Honey cakes. You take a moment to breathe it in. Honey is a medieval miracle. It preserves fruit, sweetens ale, and masks unpleasant flavours. Honey rarely spoils. You watch the baker drizzle it over a tray of small pastries. You're almost tempted to buy one until you notice the tray swarmed by bees. The baker waves them away, shrugs, and continues. They're part of the process too. As the sun climbs higher, you watch a family begin preparing their midday meal. They gather scraps of leftover bread, a ladle of perpetual stew, a handful of wilted greens, and a piece of fish that's definitely past its prime. They cook everything together over a small fire. The smell isn't pleasant, but the children eat eagerly. Hunger sharpens appetite, dulls hesitation, and makes every bite precious. Eventually you sit on a stone bench, overwhelmed by the sheer resilience of medieval people. Their food system is built on necessity, creativity, and desperation. Nothing is wasted. Rot is managed, disguised, or endured. Stomachs grow tough. Taste buds adapt. Families survive not because their food is safe, but because they learn to make unsafe food survivable. You've eaten nothing today, but somehow you feel full of disbelief, awe, and a newfound appreciation for refrigerators, expiration dates, and the blessed absence of maggots in modern kitchens. You leave the market behind, your stomach twisting from the parade of half-rotten food and desperate preservation techniques. The midday sun hangs heavily overhead, warming the cobblestones as people move through the streets with baskets, sacks, and bundles. But no matter where you walk in a medieval town, one building dominates the skyline and the rhythm of daily life: the church. Its square bell tower rises above the cramped houses like a watchful guardian, or perhaps a warden, reminding everyone that in medieval Europe, the church is not simply a place of worship. It is the centre of life, law, learning, birth, marriage, sin, death, and everything in between. The church owns your beginning. It owns your end. And if you have enough money, it can even shorten the time your soul spends suffering in the afterlife. As you step toward the church courtyard, you feel the shift in atmosphere immediately. The crowds become quieter, more reverent, but also more anxious. Religion here is not a gentle guide. It is a constant presence, a set of rules and expectations wrapped in ceremony, fear, tradition, and profound social power. You walk under the stone archway leading into the courtyard and find a line of townspeople waiting to approach a man in ornate robes. He sits at a wooden table with a parchment ledger, a quill, and a box filled with coins. A sign beside him announces indulgences for sale. You stare in disbelief. Indulgences are spiritual coupons that medieval Christians can buy to reduce the years they, or their deceased loved ones, must spend in purgatory. Purgatory, according to the Church, is the place where souls go to be purified through suffering before entering heaven. The more you sin, the longer you stay. The more you pay, the shorter the stay becomes. It is transactional salvation, and people buy these pieces of paper with trembling hope and fear. A woman in a patched dress empties her coin pouch, offering everything she has. She whispers that the indulgence is for her deceased husband, who drank heavily and cursed often. She fears he is suffering, and she cannot bear the thought. The priest nods solemnly, writes her name, and hands her the indulgence. Her eyes water with relief. Behind her, a wealthy merchant drops a heavy bag of coins on the table, asking for indulgences for himself, his wife, his children, and, why not, his grandchildren. Salvation here is measured in silver. Inside the church, the air smells of incense, wax, and stone. Sunlight filters through narrow stained glass windows, pooling coloured light across the worn floor. People kneel on wooden benches, murmuring prayers, many clutching rosaries or small relics. Relics are treasured items believed to be connected to saints, bones, hair, scraps of clothing, even vials of something said to be saintly blood. The more powerful the saint, the more effective the relic. Churches across Europe display relics proudly, drawing pilgrims from distant lands who hope to touch them and receive blessings or healing. But not all relics are genuine. In fact, the medieval relic trade is filled with fakes. You hear a priest enthusiastically describing the church's prized relic, a feather from the Archangel Gabriel. A skeptical man at the back whispers to his friend that another church in the next town claims to have Gabriel's tooth. The friend shrugs. Both men still donate coins. Authenticity doesn't matter as much as belief. You move closer to the altar, examining the relic displayed in a golden reliquary. People lean forward reverently, kissing the glass, tears streaking their faces. The relic, real or fake, offers comfort. The medieval world is a place of disease, war, hunger, and death. People need assurances that something holy watches over them, even if that holiness cost a few coins. A bell rings, and the confession line forms. You watch as people enter the small wooden booth to confess their sins to the priest. Confession is mandatory in medieval Europe, required at least once a year. The church wants to know everything. Who slept with whom, who stole bread, who muttered a curse, who skipped mass, who harboured sinful thoughts. Private sins are not private here, and once confessed, they come with mandatory penance, prayers, fasting, community work, or payments. Many choose payments. It's faster, easier, and the church benefits. You overhear a man muttering about how he confessed to shouting at his wife and now owes a penance fee that's nearly a week's wages. His friend nudges him and says he should feel lucky. Last month a man who skipped Lent had to donate half a cow. Stepping outside, you walk around to the graveyard behind the church. Rows of wooden crosses jut from the earth at uneven angles. Burial here is not just tradition, it's law. Only the church has the authority to handle death. If someone dies unbaptized, unconfessed, or excommunicated, their burial becomes complicated or even denied. A frantic family stands near a small grave where a baby is being lowered into the ground. The infant died before receiving baptism. The priest assures the grieving mother that the child may enter heaven through God's mercy, though official doctrine is less comforting. The mother clutches a small carved toy and sobs. You feel the weight of this moment, the harsh reality that even in death the church controls the narrative. You wander toward a small stone building attached to the church, a charnel house. Inside, stacked skulls line the walls, staring silently with hollow eyes. Graveyards fill quickly in medieval towns, so older bones are exhumed periodically to make space for new bodies. The old bones are stored here. You run your hand along a row of skulls, each one once belonging to someone who lived, worked, suffered, and attended Mass in this very town. Now they are reminders of mortality. Memento mori, remember that you will die. Medieval Europeans carry this reminder everywhere. Outside again, you hear chanting. A long procession moves through the street, priests carrying relics high above their heads, acolytes swinging censers filled with incense, townspeople following behind, praying aloud. The procession is meant to ward off plague, famine, or bad fortune. People step from their houses to kneel, bow, or simply watch with fearful respect. Religion here isn't a choice. It is the foundation of life, the social glue, the moral compass, and the looming authority. People obey because the alternative is unthinkable. Excommunication isn't just a religious punishment, it's social death. The excommunicated are denied sacraments, refused burial, shunned by neighbours, and sometimes declared outlaws. The fear of spiritual isolation shapes behaviour as effectively as any law. Later, you stumble into a small tavern where a group of villagers gather around a travelling preacher. He slams his fist on the table, warning of demons lurking in corners, witches hiding among neighbours, sinners who must repent immediately. The villagers listen, wide-eyed. Some clutch their rosaries, some whisper apologies under their breath. Superstition blends seamlessly with doctrine here. Mention of demons, miracles, saints, angels, curses and blessings flows as naturally as talk of the weather. One woman tells you she carries a relic fragment, a tiny sliver of bone said to belong to St. Cecilia. She touches it for protection when walking alone at night. Another man insists he received a divine dream telling him to donate half his harvest to the church. No one questions it. As the day wears on, you realise just how deeply the church shapes every moment of medieval life. It dictates what you eat. No meat on Fridays. When you can marry, not during Lent or Advent. How you can make love, with strict rules about positions and times. When you wake, bells. When you sleep, bells. When you work, when you rest. When you confess, when you fast, when you feast. The church owns your schedule, your fears, your hopes, and your afterlife. You walk into the church one last time as the evening candles flicker. The priest stands before the congregation, preaching about salvation. He reminds everyone that heaven is attainable, but only with obedience, confession, and the occasional donation. The candles glow warmly, casting long shadows. People kneel with bowed heads. You look around and feel the weight of it all. The faith, the fear, the devotion, the manipulation, the comfort, the control. In medieval Europe, the church is not merely a building, it is life itself. It sells forgiveness, dictates morality, controls knowledge, and interprets death. And everyone accepts it because the world is dangerous, unpredictable, and often cruel. Salvation is the one promise people cling to, and the church is the sole gatekeeper. You step out of the shadow of the towering church, your mind still tangled in its rituals and its unshakable grip on medieval life. The bells continue to ring behind you, marking the passing hours with a hollow certainty. But as you walk deeper into the town's side streets, you notice something else, something sharp, lively, chaotic. Children. At first glance, you expect to see carefree play, laughter, maybe a game with wooden toys or pebbles. But medieval childhood is something else entirely. These children aren't just miniature people running errands between moments of fun. They're workers, apprentices, caretakers, labourers, fighters, and sometimes even rulers. Childhood here is brief, brutal, and breathtakingly fragile. You quickly realise that the medieval world treats children with a mixture of affection, practicality, and astonishing hardness. Your first encounter is with a girl no older than 5 carrying a jug of water that looks far too heavy for her small frame. She trudges along the muddy road, spilling water with each step, her brow furrowed with effort. An older woman, her mother maybe, calls out instructions. Keep your back straight, don't drag your feet, don't spill too much. The girl picks up her pace, trying harder. In medieval Europe, children are expected to work as soon as they can walk steadily. They sweep floors, fetch water, tend livestock, gather firewood, stir pots, and watch younger siblings. Childhood is not a period of exploration. It's an apprenticeship in survival. You watch the girl disappear into a cottage and you can't help feeling a tightness in your chest. 5-year-olds in your world might worry about crayons or cartoons. Here, they worry about chores and punishment. Farther down the street you see a group of boys, maybe 7, maybe 8, sharpening sticks and practicing mock sword swings in a fenced yard. Their movements are serious, intentional. A stern-looking man watches from the side, correcting their posture, adjusting their feet, demonstrating how to block a blow. These aren't playful games, these are lessons. If the boys are from noble or knightly families, their training has already begun. At age 7, boys from wealthy households become pages, assigned to serve a lord and learn the foundations of knighthood. They practice riding, swordsmanship, wrestling, and obeying strict codes of discipline. By 14, they will become squires, performing real duties in battle. You watch one boy swing too wide, and the instructor cracks him sharply across the legs with a stick. The boy winces but tries again. Pain is instruction. Discipline is life. Nearby, a group of peasants work in a field outside the town walls. Among them are children, 6, 8, 10 years old, scattering seeds, pulling weeds, chasing birds away from the crops. Their hands move automatically, their eyes focused. A tiny boy swings a wooden mallet at a crow, missing and stumbling. His mother calls out that if he can't keep the birds away, dinner will be lean next week. The boy straightens, raises the mallet again, and tries harder. Childhood here isn't measured in birthdays. It's measured in productivity. Families depend on their children's labour to survive. No matter how small you are, you're expected to contribute. Death hangs heavily over medieval childhood. You see it in the way parents watch their children, not with carefree indulgence, but with a quiet, anxious protectiveness that borders on sorrow. Infant mortality is high. Many children die before age 5. Disease, malnutrition, infection, and accidents are constant threats. As you walk past a small home where a midwife tends to a newborn, you overhear her whisper to the mother, "Wait until the 3rd day to name her, God may not let her stay." Naming a child too soon is considered tempting fate. Many babies don't survive long enough for priests to baptize them. Parents love fiercely, but they also guard their hearts. Losing children is normal, grieving them is endless. Accepting loss is necessary. At the marketplace you spot a group of apprentices, children barely into their teens, working under the supervision of masters. One boy is learning to hammer metal into usable shapes at a blacksmith's forge. Sweat pours down his face, his arms tremble from the weight of the hammer, but he keeps going. Apprenticeship contracts can begin as early as age 7 or 8. The child is handed over to a master craftsman who becomes their teacher, disciplinarian, and guardian. In exchange for labour, the child learns a trade: tailoring, weaving, carpentry, baking, leatherwork. You watch a girl stirring a giant vat of dye behind a cloth merchant's stall. Her hands are stained blue, her nails cracked, but she sings as she works. Apprenticeship is harsh, but for many children it is the only path to stability. You pass an older child, perhaps 12 or 13, carrying a heavy sack on his back. He's an errand boy for a merchant, running messages across town. His face is serious, purposeful. He knows he must earn his keep. Nearby, a girl of similar age watches 3 toddlers while kneading a lump of dough. She wipes flour on her apron and calls out warnings whenever one of the toddlers wanders too close to the hearth. She's practically raising her younger siblings while her parents work. Childhood is minimal. Responsibility arrives early. In contrast, noble children live a different version of early adulthood. You catch sight of a well-dressed boy riding a pony under the watchful eye of his tutor. The tutor holds a long strap, ready to correct errors. The boy recites Latin phrases between breaths. Noble children are trained not only in physical skills but also in religion, etiquette, mathematics, languages, and heraldry. Their education is strict and rigorous. They learn diplomacy, obedience, and strategy. And if they show promise, their families begin arranging their future marriages before puberty. For noble girls, this means learning to manage a household, sew fine linens, read scripture, and behave with modest grace. For noble boys, it means preparing for war, politics, or the church. But even nobility doesn't guarantee safety. You overhear a group of villagers discussing the sudden death of a child nobleman from a fever. Disease doesn't discriminate between classes. A cough can become a death sentence. A small cut can fester into infection. A winter chill can lead to pneumonia. Medieval families live with constant fear. Some respond with faith, some with superstition, some with relentless work. But none escape the reality that children here walk a thin line between life and death. As you continue walking, you encounter a group of boys engaged in rough play, more violent than any playground scuffle you've ever seen. They tackle, shove, and swing sticks like weapons. One boy falls, scraping his knee deeply. He bites his lip, suppressing tears. Crying is shameful after a certain age. Parents expect toughness. When a boy limps toward his mother for comfort, she examines the wound, nods approvingly that it isn't serious, and tells him to get back to playing. The boy obeys. Medieval childhood is stern. Emotional softness is rarely indulged. You turn a corner and find a child no older than 9 sitting beside a loom inside a craftsman's shop. His hands move with remarkable precision as he threads yarn across wooden spools. His master stands nearby inspecting the work. When the child makes an error, the master taps his knuckles lightly. Correction, not punishment. Craftsmanship demands excellence, and children are moulded from an early age to achieve it. The boy works silently, focused. He is earning his place in the world one thread at a time. Walking farther, you stumble upon something unexpected, a cluster of children listening to an elderly storyteller outside a tavern. They sit on barrels and crates wrapped with attention as he recounts tales of dragons, saints, miracles, and legendary battles. This moment is the closest thing you've seen to childhood joy, a stolen sliver of imagination amid the grind of daily responsibility. The children smile, laugh, and whisper. For a brief moment they appear softer, younger, freer, but as soon as the story ends they scatter to return to their tasks. Then, something more shocking catches you off guard. A group of townspeople gather near a castle gate where a herald loudly announces the crowning of a child king in a distant land. You blink, surprised. But medieval Europe has seen many child rulers, some toddlers, some barely into adolescence. Royal bloodlines don't wait for maturity. If a king dies, and his heir is a child, the crown goes to that child immediately. Regents and councils rule in their stead, but the child's decisions, presence, and symbolism still shape politics. Children carry immense responsibility here, sometimes more than adults, and while other children chase chickens or fetch water, the child king navigates assassination attempts, diplomatic pressures, and wars. Childhood is a privilege very few medieval children ever truly experience. You move toward the town's edge, where families work together in the fading light. A woman calls her children to gather firewood. A boy sharpens a sickle for tomorrow's harvest. A small girl feeds chickens with the precision of someone who's done it her whole life. Parents seldom hover. They trust their children to know their tasks and complete them. Failure means hunger. Mistakes mean consequences. Childhood is not a training ground. It is active participation in survival. As the sun dips low, casting golden light across the fields, you notice how medieval families bond, not through leisure, but through shared work. Children stand beside their parents, learning by watching and doing. A father teaches his son to tie knots. A mother guides her daughter in repairing a torn sleeve. A grandfather shows a boy how to sharpen a blade safely. Family, here, is not sentimental. It is functional. And yet, beneath the practicality, you see genuine affection, rough, unpolished, but real. Parents kiss scraped foreheads. Children hold hands. Siblings share chores. Survival requires unity. Finally, as evening bells ring and smoke curls from every chimney, you sit near a cottage watching a mother tuck her 3 children into a single straw-filled bed. She crosses herself. kisses each child's forehead, and whispers a prayer for protection. Even in a world where children work, fight, and face impossible odds, love persists, quietly, firmly, without flourish. And as you rise to leave, you understand that medieval childhood is not a gentle chapter. It is a crucible. One most children do not survive long, but one that shapes the entire medieval world. Morning creeps over the town like a hesitant hand brushing across the tops of chimneys and rooftops. But instead of bringing warmth or peace, it only highlights the uneasy truth you've been steadily learning in every corner of medieval life. This is a world where pain is not only common, it is orchestrated, regulated, sharpened into a tool of justice and spectacle. As you walk through the awakening streets, you notice a tension in the air. A subtle shift in how people move. There's excitement, dread, curiosity, and something like resignation. You follow the flow of townsfolk drifting toward the square as if drawn by a gravity you cannot escape. Yesterday, the square held an execution and the trial of an unfortunate pig. Today, the crowd gathers for something even more unsettling, the deliberate, legal, and enthusiastically attended use of torture. The wooden platform in the square has transformed overnight. Instead of the scaffold used for hangings, a different kind of structure commands the centre. Thick wooden beams form a frame where ropes hang coiled like waiting serpents. Iron cuffs bolt from the posts. A table nearby is laden with devices that glint malevolently in the morning light. Iron tongs, wedges, ropes, clamps, and strange instruments whose purposes your mind instinctively refuses to imagine. The townspeople gather in clusters, whispering about who is being questioned today. Torture here is not punishment. It is a method of extracting confessions, information, or agreement. It is legal, codified, even expected in certain cases, and when the church or the local lord orders it, everyone comes to watch. A man stands near the edge of the platform, his wrists bound, his face pale but resolved. He is accused of theft, and possibly something worse. Rumours swirl about the disappearance of a merchant's silver, and whispers of suspicious behaviour. In this era, uncertainty is enough to justify interrogation. The town's bailiff, robed in dark wool, steps forward and announces that by order of the court, the accused will be examined. Examination is the sanitized word for what follows. You swallow hard as the executioner, who also serves as torturer, adjust the ropes hanging from the frame and test their strength with practice pulls. The crowd watches attentively, even children. Some stand on their toes to see better. The torturer begins with the strappado, a common method used throughout Europe. The man is forced onto a stool, his hands tied behind his back. The ropes are looped around his wrists, then thrown over the top beam. The torturer gives a nod and two assistants pull hard. The man's body jerks upward, his shoulders twisting unnaturally. His arms wrench backward in a way joints were never meant to bend. The stool is kicked aside, leaving him suspended by his bound wrists. A scream tears from his throat, raw and immediate. It echoes across the square. Reverberating off stone and timber, his body convulses. The crowd murmurs, not with horror, but with the absorbed fascination of people watching a story unfold. In the medieval mind, torture is a tool of truth. Pain strips away lies. Suffering purifies confession. If a man admits nothing under torture, some believe he's innocent. If he confesses, guilt is proven. Logic bends under the weight of superstition and fear. You watch the bailiff question the man calmly, asking about the stolen silver. The man shouts incoherently, insisting he knows nothing. The torturer signals again. The assistants pull the rope higher. The man shrieks. You grip the edges of your cloak, hands trembling, because you have never seen shoulders dislocate in real time before, and you pray you never see it again. The scene doesn't end quickly. Medieval torture is methodical. They hoist the man, lower him, hoist him again, each time wringing more screams from his body. His joints crack audibly. Sweat and tears streak down his face. He begins to stammer, begging for mercy, babbling details both plausible and impossible. The bailiff listens, pen in hand, waiting for something he considers useful. You realise with a sickening drop that the goal is not truth, it is compliance. And medieval compliance is written in agony. The torture pauses. The bailiff confers with a clerk, debating whether the man's words constitute a confession. The crowd waits with interest. Some look sympathetic. Others munch bread and nod knowingly. A few teenagers laugh nervously, trying to appear brave. Pain is nothing new to them. Pain is woven into the fabric of their daily existence. But this is something else. This is controlled suffering, organised like theatre. The torturer moves to the table of instruments and selects something that looks like a metal pear split into sections. The pear of anguish, a device designed to be inserted into a body cavity and then expanded by twisting a screw. It is used on gossipers, blasphemers, or those accused of adultery. Today, however, the torturer merely displays it, letting the crowd murmur with recognition. This gesture alone often pushes the accused toward confession. The man's sobs are shaking violently. He blurts out something about hiding the silver beneath a tree. The bailiff raises an eyebrow, sceptical. The torturer sets the pear down gently as if handling something precious, and selects iron boots instead. The iron boots are a set of metal cases that encase the lower legs. Once locked in place, wedges are hammered between the metal and the flesh, crushing bones slowly. Assistants attach them to the man's shins. He kicks weakly, but pain has drained him of strength. The first wedge is hammered in with a dull, stomach-turning thud. The man screams again, the kind of sound that pierces more than your ears. Another wedge, another crack. You feel sweat bead on your forehead, not from the heat, but from the intensity of human suffering happening only feet away. The crowd murmurs, some in awe, some in satisfaction, some in impatience. Torture sessions can last hours, even days. Everyone here knows that. The man finally breaks completely. He wails that he stole the silver, hid it, sold it, gave it to demons. His confession shifts wildly, blending truth, fear, and desperate invention. It doesn't matter. The bailiff nods and announces that the confession is sufficient. The torture stops. The crowd sighs, the tension dissipating. A few people drift away. Others stay to discuss the session as though analysing a public performance. The man is cut down, barely conscious. He will be executed later, but for now, the important part, the confession, has been achieved. You step back, gasping for fresh air, but it doesn't help. The square is filled with the metallic scent of blood and the sharp tang of sweat. You move toward the edge of the crowd, trying to escape, but medieval Europe has more lessons for you. Two guards drag out another prisoner. This time, a woman accused of witchcraft. Her crime: a neighbour saw her collecting herbs at night. She muttered something about a sick child recovering. Rumours spiralled, fear bloomed. Witchcraft accusations spread like wildfire across the continent, and torture becomes the primary means of proving guilt. The torturer returns to the table and lifts a heavy spiked wheel, the breaking wheel, a method reserved for serious crimes, though definitions of serious vary wildly. The woman is tied spread-eagle to a plank. The wheel is raised. The crowd leans in. The torturer brings it down on her limbs, once, twice, 3 times, carefully, deliberately breaking bones without killing her. The screams are different this time, higher, thinner, desperate. She begs for mercy, but mercy is not part of this ritual. When the torturer stops, her limbs lie twisted, useless. The bailiff steps forward to question her, asking about demons, pacts, curses. In her agony, she confesses to anything. She would confess to raising the dead if it made the pain stop. He writes everything down carefully. The confession is recorded as truth. As you stare at her broken form, you realise that medieval torture is not chaotic or uncontrolled. It is structured, procedural, and frighteningly confident. The torturer is a respected professional. The bailiff is calm. The crowd is accustomed. Torture here is not cruelty for cruelty's sake. It is law, It is investigation. It is justice in the eyes of a world without forensic science. If you cannot prove innocence, pain will pull the truth from you, or something that passes for it. You retreat from the square, your legs shaking as you stumble through the streets. But even outside the public square, torture lurks everywhere. You hear whispers about neighbours punished by ordeal, trial by water, where a bound person is thrown into a river. If they sink, they are innocent. If they float, guilt is proven by the idea that water rejects sinners. You pass a well where two women discuss a case of hot iron ordeal. A man was forced to carry a red-hot bar for several steps. If his burns healed cleanly in 3 days, he was innocent. If not, he was guilty. The women nod approvingly. God shows the truth, one says. You glance at the church, remembering that the church sanctions these ordeals. Religion and pain are intertwined here. Inquisition courts use torture to root out heresy. Local courts use it to settle disputes. Lords use it to maintain authority. Every system leans on suffering to extract clarity. As the sun lowers, casting long shadows over the town, you find yourself walking toward the quiet edge of the river. The water ripples gently, indifferent to everything you've seen. The town continues its daily life. Children run, merchants shout, mothers stir pots, blacksmiths hammer iron, but beneath it all lies a reality you cannot ignore. This is a world where pain is institutional, where suffering is a tool, where justice is sharp, heavy, and relentless. Torture here is not hidden behind closed doors. It stands in the town square, under the open sky, with children peering between adults' legs and neighbours debating techniques over dinner. Pain is public. Confession is spectacle. And truth, real truth, doesn't matter as much as maintaining the fragile order of a brutal world. By the time darkness settles, you feel drained, as though you've been wrung out like a soaked cloth. Everything you've witnessed in medieval Europe has been shocking, strange, unsettling. But nothing has cut as deeply as this final lesson in how far a society will go to shape obedience and extract certainty. You lie awake that night, listening to distant echoes you pray are only in your imagination. And you understand now, more than ever, that medieval life is not only filled with hardship, it is built upon systems that protect order through fear, pain, and the unwavering belief that suffering reveals truth. The night settles over medieval Europe with a softness that feels almost unreal after everything you've witnessed. The clamour of the day fades into muted murmurs, distant animal calls, and the occasional bark of a dog echoing between timber-framed houses. You walk slowly through the dim, uneven streets, feeling the cool air brush gently across your face, carrying away, just a little, the heaviness that clung to you through every shocking, strange, and unsettling moment of this journey. The torches flicker low along the walls, their orange glow trembling like tired fireflies, no longer fierce or dramatic, merely keeping the darkness company. You pause beneath a quiet archway where moss grows thick between the stones, and for the first time today, no one is shouting, working, bleeding, bargaining, or suffering. The stillness feels foreign in this world, but you let it settle into you anyway. You breathe more slowly now, the air cooler, gentler, less crowded with scents and noise. Your thoughts drift, loosening their grip on the vivid images of filth, crowds, pain, and strange customs. Instead, your mind sinks into the broader rhythm of medieval nights, the way families huddle close around fading hearth fires, the way the wind threads itself through thatched roofs, the way the stars shine just the same now as they did centuries ago. You walk past a cottage and hear a soft lullaby through the thin walls, a mother humming to a child. In another home, someone stirs a pot quietly, saving a bit of warmth for the morning. Everywhere, the exhaustion of hard lives gives way to a fragile peace, a calm that only deepens as the world darkens further. Your steps slow, your eyes grow heavy. Even the distant bells seem gentler now, calling not for labour or prayer, but for rest. Let the harshness of the day blur at the edges. Let the quiet wrap around you like a warm cloak. Let yourself drift safely and softly, away from the noise of centuries and toward your own calm night,